Good afternoon. Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you've joined me today. It's a cold, blustery February day. I awoke early this morning to a pitch black room, no clock, no power. Went to wash my hands, no water. Put my warmest robe on and slippers, came downstairs. My husband was lighting candles, and my son, who was here, they went out and found propane and were able to make a cup of coffee, a pot of coffee on the, oh my, what a morning. And so grateful that they could have. But this little fire that's behind me is actually a gas propane fire. And do you know that it works when no power is available in the house? Well, if you haven't gotten your tea yet, please pause and get your tea, and I will be waiting for you. And I'm trying to play you Mozart string quartets today, but for some reason they're not wanting to play, so we'll see if it comes through at all. But if I'm going to show you, I have chosen a really beautiful red and white pot and creamer and sugar that I think look very much like perhaps what George Washington, we always think of George Washington in terms of red and white and cherry blossoms, because remember the story when he was a young man, he wouldn't tell a lie, and he had chopped down the cherry tree, and his father, it was his father's pride and joy, the cherry tree. But George confessed and said, "I'm sorry, Father, I have cut down the tree." Well, his father was a wise man. And do you know, he was so very, very proud of George that he didn't punish him. And he actually put in the garden with rocks the name George. Isn't that beautiful? So now I'm going to pour out. I have 2 cups. Steaming hot, one for you, and I'm going to put your cup right here, and I'm going to pour a cup for me. Oh boy, oh my, well, I'm lucky that didn't break. Some of these pots you have to really hang on to, don't you? And this is my little creamer. I like a little milk in mine, you know that. Take a little touch of milk. And then it's got a really nice sugar bowl. And I put a little red napkin ring with a pink napkin for George. Because Monday, the 19th, is President's Day. Oh, that's good. Because I live in Washington State, I like to really celebrate George's birthday. And then, of course, we have Abraham Lincoln, wonderful president that we celebrate. And you know, George was so special, and in our state, in our capital, there's a great big bust of George, and our seal, that someone took the quarter and turned it into the Washington State seal with the picture of George Washington on it. And in the museum here, there used to be the seal machine that showed the original design of the seal. It's really amazing, the story behind designs. I heard it once said that Mr. Eiffel, the man who built the Eiffel Tower, that he sat in a restaurant and sketched it and showed it to his friends, and they were quite impressed. And then came the Eiffel Tower. Isn't that amazing? Well, for George, I have a special cream cake, and it should have cherries on it, but it has strawberries, but I put it on this beautiful red plate, which has, I can't really show you, well, maybe I can. It has, I'm gonna hold this gently, and it has a picture of a man and woman that look very similar to Martha and George. It's a little hard to see, but that is, I love this red and white transferware china. This little cream cake was frozen before, and that's why I was able to do that. Don't worry, I don't normally do that, but I wanted to show you the plate. And it was from another kind of a birthday party, and I saved it, and I thought someday I'll put that on the tea table. I'm going to hold this now. I need a little more tea because I just think this day is so chilly, even though I've got a heater and a fireplace. Oh, that tea is so good. Well, the reason I was going to play Mozart was because he was alive during the time of George Washington, and all the founding fathers knew about Mozart. He was very famous. And remember, they danced the minuet, and it was Thomas Jefferson also met Mozart, and Thomas Jefferson was a violinist, and he played string quartet music in the White House. And he thought Mozart was nice, but he loved Johann Sebastian Bach's music the best. We all have favorites, right? But Mozart's music was so for that time, and I don't know what's going on with my musical device here, but it's not playing, but we'll just have the fire accompany us, okay? It'll be a quiet tea talk today. Well, I wanted to mention President's Day, and my husband made something today so fabulous that I have brought it to the tea table. It just came out of the oven, and it is, I'll hold it like that, rolls, homemade, whole wheat, the best flour on the West Coast. I got it through a friend, and it's on a beautiful red plate. And let's pull one of these rolls off. I don't think he would mind. Let's see. I'll tell you what he made them. He was baking bread. He bakes bread every once in a while. And I knew we were going to have hamburgers tonight, homemade hamburgers. Every once in a while, we like that. We make them healthy with, lots of vegetable and everything with it. And so I said, why don't you make homemade hamburger buns? Well, this is almost like a dinner roll, but I think we'll just slice it and make it into, oh my goodness, this smells good. Should I take one little bite? Just one little taste? Oh, wow. That is award-winning. Oh my goodness. That is truly award-winning. Homemade. If you can make homemade bread, even once in a while, It's so worth it. It's not that hard. My mother used to bake bread, and she had a recipe. I think I'll put this back over here and you can still see it. She had a recipe that I had brought her a cookbook from Canada. I had a friend that I went to visit on the train in Canada at Christmas, after Christmas once in Saskatchewan. And there are a lot of German Mennonites. Well, his mother had a Bible Christian bookstore in the little town in Saskatchewan. And she said, you can pick something out. Well, I wanted to bring something home to my mother, and I saw this cookbook, Mennonite cookbook. I thought, well, that would be interesting. So I brought it to her, and she found the best recipe. It is so simple, I can tell it to you. And basically, you just start it with yeast and water, and she would put a little sugar or brown sugar or a little molasses, maybe a couple tablespoons, and then you let the yeast rise, for about 45 minutes. Then you add half of your flour, and I don't know the exact, but what it is, it's half dark and half white, and a little bit of salt, and that is all. And it made the best bread. It was everyone's favorite. That sliced with homemade jam at any dinner table is an absolute hit. And it wasn't hard. And it keeps for 3-4 days and 5 days maybe if you keep it in a plastic or wrapped in tin foil. The difference is insurmountable. It is so good. And the only bread I would say that really compares to that is bread that I had in Austria, that I remember Karina, and she's on the tea table, the little town of Lilienfeld. We went to the bakery, and she bought a loaf of bread that was like this long, and it was dark, maybe sourdough rye, and it was this long, and I thought, oh my, how is it going to last? And we were staying at this music camp, but every morning we were slicing a slice. It lasted all week, and I don't know how, but it was as fresh on Friday as it had been on Monday. That bread with a piece of strong German Austrian cheese was just absolutely spectacular, just the best. So we can make it ourselves, and maybe not every week, but maybe every month or once every 2 months. It's a blessing to the family, and a lot of men are really good bread makers because they're strong, and it takes kneading. Or I actually have, I don't have it out here, I have it in storage, what you call a bread machine that mixes it, as I used to make bread when my children were young at home. And we had this machine that was really incredible that did all the kneading and wonderful. I even have a grinder where I used to grind my own flour from the wheat berry, and that is just over the top too. And it's not as hard as it now. I have another friend who has a bread maker, and her bread is fantastic. She makes the best cardamom bread I've ever tasted. So a bread maker, that's easy. You dump it in and it does all the work, and there it is. Well, I had wanted to talk, yes, about President's Day and honor our wonderful George Washington. People do not realize, but all around the world, if you read the contemporary literature about George Washington, he was admired beyond any other man. He had a character that was so pure and unusual, so selfless, so intelligent, so able to rule and lead. They wanted to make him a king, but he refused. He said, no, we are a republic and we are all equal. And they begged him to come, and so he said, okay, I will serve the people. He, after the War of Independence, and he was a general and he did so many great things, He wanted to go home to his farm. He wanted to go home and take care of his farm. He would ride around his farm on his horse and supervise. That's what he liked to do. He wasn't looking for glory and honor. He was willing to serve the people of America. What an example. And he's called the father of our country. And he was known for being so honest. Honesty is probably the most important character quality. I think honesty is the determining factor in all of the other character qualities. And it, like with George, when he cut down the cherry tree, it wasn't easy to be honest. He didn't want to admit that he had done something wrong. That's hard, isn't it? But honesty is the best policy. So to the best of our ability, let us be honest and clear. You know, in the land of Holland, they are very deeply religious people traditionally. Traditionally in Holland, every home had a Bible, and it would be on a stand and it would be open. They loved learning, and they would have, if they could afford it, a reading room. And the Bible had a prominent place in their home. And one of the things about Dutch architecture, if you go and walk down the streets, you will look in the front window and you will be able to look through the house and see through the back window. Well, do you know, it was told to me that that is a reflection of their philosophy, that we should not be hiding anything. We should be as clear as glass. And they wanted to live lives of openness and honesty. It goes back to honesty. Interesting, because when I was in Norway, I ran into the same thing. The most important character quality that they were looking for was honesty and integrity. And it is something that really is the most important, essential ingredient to good, fair, happy relationships. And interestingly enough, it's something that is an individual's decision. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. It doesn't matter if you're famous. It doesn't matter if you're highly gifted or if you are a very simple person. That character quality is a choice. And I'll tell you why I was thinking about it. Because I was talking to someone very special this week, and they were saying, you know, we were saying how sad it is, this shoplifting that's going on across America. People going in and she said, you know, the only thing that will keep that from stopping is a person's conscience. And I thought, isn't that true? It is an individual choice. Do we want to feel good down deep inside? Do what's right. It's from the olden days. It's in every great classic literature. It's the theme of the Bible. It's the theme of every good philosophical thought. The foundation is honesty. And that is what George Washington had, and that is what Abraham Lincoln had also. These are men we can truly admire. And it goes with the next holiday that I just wanted to talk a little bit about, which happened yesterday. And most of you know, on your calendar, it will say Ash Wednesday. Well, many people don't know really what it means. They know it's some kind of a holiday. Maybe it's a religious holiday because the Tuesday night before is Mardi Gras, and everyone seems to know about Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is like a big carnival, and it definitely happens in places like Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where it is the tradition on Tuesday, before Ash Wednesday, it's a big party. And people will dress up in costumes. They'll dress up with maybe a mask and all kinds of festivities and parties and eating and dancing and singing and much joviality. And so why is that? What is that all about? Well, because Ash Wednesday, the next day, is the beginning of Lent. And Lent is a 40-day season before Easter that is celebrated all around the world and has been celebrated since the time of Christ. It's from the early church, and it's the day of, you will see people, when you go to church, you will have some people come out with a cross on them with ashes. Well, you say, what does that mean? What does that signify? Well, if you want to study it, you can study it more, but I'll give you a brief overview. Going back to the early church, they were looking to the Old Testament of how do we conduct ourselves and how do we worship? How do we worship God? That's really the bottom line. Christian worship came directly out of Judaism, Judeo-Christian worship. It came from the days of Moses and the designing of the tabernacle, then Solomon's temple. But worship is bigger than just public coming together. The first mention of worship really is in the Garden of Eden. It's when Adam and Eve walked with God. Worship is just connecting with God. It's loving God, telling him you love him, and allowing him to love you and receiving his love and presence. It's a relationship. I'm actually teaching a class on worship right now. And what I like to tell my students is, I see worship as our heart has a little magnet in it from birth. And that magnet is just craving that other connection, the other magnet. And the other magnet is God. And when that magnet of God, that presence comes and touches that heart, it's click, ah. And people say, oh, I feel so happy. Oh, I feel so peaceful. Oh, I feel love. I feel God's love. That's worship. That's really what worship is. That's the goal of worship, is that our hearts would connect to God and we would allow him to connect to us. Well, on Ash Wednesday, that day, because the greatest event in all of history is the death and resurrection of Christ, which is Easter, right? It divides the calendar. BC, before Christ, AD, after Dominion. All of the Old Testament Christians, they were not called Christians, and they were Israelites that were following the one true God. And they were looking forward to that day. They were looking forward to the cross. Then the cross happens, and then now because Christ died, we become Christians, Christ followers. We look back to the cross. So the cross is the center of history. The diagonal line represents man and God connecting. The horizontal line of the cross is us connecting with each other. That's God's plan. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. That's the great commandment. Very simple. And so Ash Wednesday is a day that has been set aside as a holy day, and many people will fast half of that day, or maybe the whole day if they're able, but or eat very simply, but they will go to church, they will pray, and have a period of dedication of the next 40 days, Lent. Lent is from the word length, lengthen of days, or spring. It's an old Anglo-Saxon word, Lent. It means longer days. But it represents the 40 days coming up to Easter. So those 40 days are to be days of contemplation and seeking the Lord. And the Ash Wednesday, some people have called it in church history the Yom Kippur of the liturgical Christian church calendar. The Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the Day of Repentance, the day of just cleansing, like taking time to sit and ponder and think back the things I want to. We all have things in our lives that we would like to just change and cleanse and go forward. Let God come in and help us and make a decision to do something different, and perhaps to give things up for that period so that we can. It's not you're earning anything, but it's you're allowing yourself to have time for spiritual contemplation and meditation. That's what it is. And the ashes come from the Old Testament. When Job was, it said when he was seeking God, he tore his garment and sat in sackcloth and ashes. And then when Esther was in terrible situation, her whole nation was going to be destroyed and she had to go before the king. It says she took off her robes, her jewels, and her beautiful scents, and she put on a rough robe and covered herself with ashes. And her head with ashes, and went and asked her maidens to pray. And she saved her nation, remember? God heard her prayer. Now, so the ashes are symbolic, and the cross, that we are Christ followers and we want to please him and do our best. And have this day. In the Middle Ages and all through church history, the liturgical calendar really ran the people's lives. You can read this in books. You have Advent. And the reason that Lent is 40 days is because Jesus, remember, he went 40 days to the wilderness to fast and pray and prepare for his ministry, remember? And so then he was tempted of the devil and the three temptations, the world, the flesh, and the devil, the desire for fame, that was the main, the desire to be great, the desire for the fleshly desires, for bread and for food. He was tempted, and so there's the three that correspond with the three sins of the Garden of Eden. First of all, Eve saw with her eye that it was good. So that is the lust of the flesh. And then that she could be as, remember the serpent said, you can be as great as God. That's the pride of life, the power, the desire for worldly power and to have more power. So it's the flesh, the spirit, and the power of the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. That's right. Okay, the lust of the eyes would have been seeing the apple, desiring it. The lust of the flesh would have been eating the apple, taking it. And the pride of life was that she was promised she could have more power than anyone else, or as much as God. Those were the three. And those are the same three that happened in Matthew. And so when Jesus did not give in to the temptation, he broke that power. He reversed that curse. He became the second Adam and rose from the dead to deliver, save us. So that is what Ash Wednesday means. It's the beginning of a holy season. It's a beautiful season. The flowers are coming, the birds are coming, spring is coming. And it's a time to just take a little time to read and to pray and to give alms. That's another thing. That desire for things and materialism, that's broken through giving alms to the poor. We're supposed to give special alms to the poor during Lent, to those who can't give back. Yes. And so it's a beautiful season, and then it will come to Holy Week. I highly recommend celebrate it to the full. This is our heritage. This is what will make you strong and me strong. This is what will make us happy, and it's shared with family and friends. So 2024, it may seem like the world is crazy and we hear all the bad news, but guess what? God hasn't changed. He's alive. He will write the last chapter. He will have the last word. He put us here at this time. We didn't put ourselves here. And he promised he would never leave us or forsake us. He promised he would take care of us. And he promised that he would give us joy. Yes. And I want to close with one of my very favorite sayings. And I've probably said this on the Tea Talk before. It's from Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was a man who went through a lot from the early childhood all his life. He had an up and down emotional roller coaster life. He truly did. And when he found the Lord, this is what he concluded. This is what he said. And I just love it. You can write this down. You will have as much laughter as you have faith. You will have as much laughter as you have faith. Faith, not in our problems. Faith in God's answers. Yes. Look up. Look up. Your redemption draweth nigh. We have no reason to look down. We have no reason to be discouraged. It does not matter what the circumstances are. We have eternal promises. Yes. And Easter is all about that. So fully embrace, and we'll talk more on the tea table about it. We'll talk about the beautiful music that's been written for the Lenten season. Yes, we will. We're going to talk about Johann Sebastian Bach again, and the St. Matthew's Passion, the St. John's Passion. And actually, Handel's Messiah was written for Easter. Yes, it was the most important holiday of all for most of the period since the time of Christ. It was the apex. So let's not miss out, okay? Thank you so much for joining me, and have a good cup of tea. Share with someone else. Decide to really participate in whatever Easter activities are at your church. Bring others with you. And if your church is not celebrating as much as you would like, visit a church that is. There are many that do more than others. And I say go where you can receive, even for the Eastertide. Yes. Thank you so much. I pray that you will all have the most wonderful week. God bless.